I remember where I was when I lived through a piece of history. Late in 2019, Martin Scorsese told the New York Times Marvel movies were not cinema. He didn't see them as equal to the things that he was making or that his colleagues made. He said they lacked spiritual, emotional, and aesthetic revelation, the kind you go to art for, the kind that changes you inside. I remember living through reading this because it was an honest shock to me. My artistic idol saying this felt like two sides of me being torn apart. Frankly, I don't think my own mother could make me as mad as Martin Scorsese did that day. In my eyes, movies like Spider-Man, The Dark Knight, and the first Iron Man movie were goalposts in a race. A race to prove that superheroes should be taken as seriously as anything else put to screen. I was so taken by superheroes because for me, they were my mythological figures. Just like for the ancient Greeks or the Romans, these were symbols of hope and perseverance. Stories that we could take valuable lessons from, and stories that needed to be told. The exciting third act of that ascent was the release of Avengers: Infinity War. The sum of a decade of buildup, the movie dominated upon release, breaking records and becoming the highest grossing and fastest grossing movie of all time. The thing that shocked me the most is that this gigantic blockbuster, the most successful movie of all time, had these revelations. It had aesthetic, emotional, and spiritual revelations, the ones that Scorsese swore were missing in these kinds of movies. Here's how. Aesthetically, Infinity War differentiates itself from the movies that came before it in a huge way. This is a grim movie, and the aesthetics match that darkness. There's a sense of inevitable doom throughout the movie. This doom can not only be heard in the dialogue of our heroes, but can be seen and felt in the visual language throughout the movie. For example, in this scene with Wanda and Vision, where Wanda reckons with the impossible grief of having to take Vision's life if the circumstances come to it. Or in this scene, where on the way to the inevitable doom, our heroes find themselves in a dark and damp alien ship. But the most striking use of darkness in the movie is this scene. Thor travels to the Forge. The Forge has literally been extinguished.
The star's gone out and the rings are frozen.
He's told that he must reignite the Forge in order to continue. The light in this scene is a glimmer of hope, something Thor and the audience desperately need after witnessing his brother getting massacred right at the beginning of the movie. But Thor having to literally use his body and almost dying to reignite this Forge reinforces one of the main themes of the movie, that of the inevitability of loss. Loss is coming. For all of us, whether we're ready for it or not, whether we want to accept it or not, there is some point in our lives where we will have to deal with it. And deal with it they do, because the emotional revelation in this movie is that of a punch to the stomach. The ending, now infamous, isn't just a meme. The ending is brilliant because it forces you to sit with the tragedy. This is one of the few instances in the movie that's completely devoid of any music. Some aren't ready to go, others can't believe it, but it is happening. Whether they like it or not, whether we like it or not, we have to sit with this.
That ending was like a splash of ice water on a hot day. It did what most other superhero movies were too scared to do. In Batman Begins, there is loss and there is tragedy. Gotham is almost destroyed and our heroes nearly wiped out. But there is still hope in the end. Gotham and Batman both live to remain a symbol of hope and a testament to perseverance. Most superhero movies of my childhood felt mythical for this reason. Regardless of any adversity, there was still a clear message of hope, a clear statement that if you just held on, the answers would be revealed. A neat bow wrapped on the complicated box of messy, uncertain human existence. In Infinity War, there is no hope. No neat bow wrapped around this story. The heroes try, they persevere, they face adversity. Even still, they fail. The movie asks them, and by extension the audience, to sit with the failure. The movie does not give us any answers. It asks us to come to our own conclusions. This was painfully ironic for me personally. As this movie was playing in theaters, I was planning the rest of my life. On the cusp of graduating college, I was forced to face uncertainty right alongside the heroes of the story. Unlike the stories of my childhood, and unlike the rigid curriculum I had been following in my schooling, there would no longer be any clear answers or drawn-out finish lines. Infinity War forced me to reevaluate my own life. It forced me to look into the big, scary unknown. Infinity War held my shoulder gently but firmly, saying nothing as I looked out into the abyss. It was up to me, and only me, to decide what my life would be, and I loved the movie for it.
This was it. This was the movie I could show Martin Scorsese and tell him, you're wrong. This was the perfect blend of audience spectacle and emotional and spiritual revelation. But there was one more piece to this puzzle. For you see, the story of Infinity War wasn't quite over. There was one more movie to go. That movie was Avengers Endgame. And this is the movie that would truly break my heart. This is the movie that would have me question everything. After over a decade, the hype train for Endgame was the first MCU movie that I was truly on board for. I saw it at 7 in the morning on opening weekend among a packed crowd. I can't speak for why everyone else was there, but I was there for one reason. I was hungry for the spiritual and emotional complexity that I found in Infinity War. I was hungry to prove Martin Scorsese wrong yet again. What I got instead was 3 separate movies, held together thinly by non-stop fan service. This fan service felt forced and that it was made by committee. There were no revelations to be had with this movie. It felt like a perfect piece of evidence for why you shouldn't take these movies seriously. The transformative experience that I had with Infinity War, the same one that fucking proved Marty wrong, didn't matter. Because the conclusion of this story was made to not matter. I was done with the ride, and in a week's time, I would forget that I was even on it to begin with. I couldn't even imagine Endgame staying with me the way Infinity War had. So after seeing it, I shuffled the movie away in my mind and went about my life. There's a common idiom, truth is stranger than fiction. There was nothing more surreal for me than the 2020 pandemic. I had just finished college and I was expecting some kind of big dramatic push into adulthood. What I got was a global pandemic, a worldwide tragedy that changed life as I knew it. What's even stranger is that Avengers Endgame came out a year before the pandemic. What would go on to become the most successful movie of all time by far was a movie about a global tragedy. A global tragedy that the people in this world have to work through and deal with. My relationship with these movies never seems to stop being ironic. The most interesting part of Endgame is it devotes itself to a half-decade time skip. And this is weird for me. 5 years is just about how long it would take me to have a transformational experience with Endgame. Endgame and Infinity War are actually one story. One cannot exist without the other. If Infinity War is about loss itself, Endgame is how to reconcile with that loss and forge a new path forward. The revelations that Endgame makes are a beautiful synthesis of aesthetics, emotion, and spirituality. These 3 parts of the movie come together not one by one, but all at once to deliver a message of perseverance. But this perseverance, unlike the superhero movies of my childhood, is a more honest one. It tells us that the only way out is through. It tells us that in order to move on, we first have to understand and come to peace with what we are moving on from. Aesthetically, the first third of the movie is stark. The environments feel cold and empty. Despite the obvious fan service, I think that the time heist is a deliberate choice when it comes to the movie showing us how to process and move on from grief. I think it would have been really easy for them to just do a clip show, a greatest hits compilation of all the cool action scenes from the past 10 years. But what happens in Endgame is different. The action of our heroes going back to their literal past and using it as a springboard for the future is a symbolic representation of the processing of their grief. They must, quite literally, go back to their past, knowing what they know now, and use that past to forge a new path forward. When they choose to embark on the time heist, it is them choosing to reject the depression and apathy of their grief that has blocked them up to this point. It is them choosing to start a journey of healing and moving on. This is what Avengers Endgame did for my spirit. This is how it was transformational. This is how it was a revelation. Only in hindsight can we see that the pandemic was not the end of the world, but at the time, it really felt like it. Half a decade later, it seems almost unbelievable that something like this happened to the entire world. I live in New York, a city ravaged by the pandemic right at its start. But if I walk around today, I barely see any remnants of it. Endgame, even if 5 years later, gifted me a revelation. It reminded me that despite tragedy and despite loss, there is a way to move on. There is a way to continue living life. Endgame helped me understand myself and the world in a different light. And what more can we ask of the art that we experience?